Hey guys, so today's video is talking about one of the most important things you need to know about deer hunting, and that is, what is the rut, how does it affect deer behavior, and why does that greatly increase your chances of shooting a buck? So what is the rut? Well, the rut refers to the period of time in which deer are breeding, and that goes the same for moose and elk and all other sorts of ungulates. Deer breed for actually a fairly short period of time. The rut only really occurs for about 10 days, and that's a period of time in which bucks are traveling, looking for does and trying to breed does, but does themselves are only in what's called estrus, meaning that they're physiologically able to be bred and will allow bucks to breed them for 2 to 3 days. So the bucks are probably active for around 5 or 6 days before estrus and then a few days after estrus, but they're only breeding does for 2 to 3 days. So when does the rut occur? The rut occurs in the fall, and it's later in the year in the northern climates and earlier in the year in southern climates. Now that's based on the gestation period of the deer and when is the optimal time for their fawns to be born. In the southern climates, like say in the southern states, southern Texas, wherever, southern Florida, something like that, the deer are actually going to breed earlier in the year and then have their fawns earlier in the spring, but that is okay if they have their fawn in March because winter is already over and that fawn is going to have just as good a chance of survival as any other time. Now in the northern climates, the fawns are actually born in May, and they need to be born that late in the year because winter is not actually really over until April, and a fawn can't be born in April. There's nothing for it to eat and it won't survive the cold climate. That's why the rut occurs at different times depending on where you are in North America. But any sort of state or province resource on deer ecology will probably give you that information or when the rut is occurring in your area. And if you can, phone a Fish and Wildlife officer or a conservation officer and ask that person when exactly is the rut occurring in your state or your province. So what does the rut mean from a hunting perspective? Well, it means that for a period of about 10 days, bucks are going to be preoccupied with breeding and a lot less cautious, a lot less furtive. They'll also be traveling a lot during the day, whereas otherwise they would be very dormant during the day. Big mature bucks, it may surprise you to know, are actually nocturnal, and those bucks are so furtive, so secretive, you will never see them any time during the year except for that week or so during the rut. And that's a period of time where they will be looking for does and fighting other bucks to gain breeding supremacy so they can be the actual buck that breeds the doe. Other rutting behavior includes deer practice fighting with trees, and that sort of goes actually even quite a bit before the rut. You may see deer practice fighting with trees or just see rubs in the forest while you're out scouting. You'll just see a tree that's been rubbed down by antlers. One of the reasons that bucks' antlers are brown is actually from the tannins in trees and shrubs that they rub against, which actually colors their antlers. So that just goes to show you how much they actually fight with trees, that they've taken their bone, which is white, and rubbed it brown on trees. And then closer to the rut, actually start fighting one another so that they can determine which is the dominant buck and which buck gets to breed the does. But because bucks are so preoccupied with breeding and fighting, they are just much more present during the day, and you're going to see a lot more of them as you travel around. And it wouldn't be uncommon to see a big buck out in the open following the scent of a doe or does at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and not paying any attention to his safety, which is a behavior you would not see any other time during the year. And that's the optimal time to hunt bucks, because that's when they're out and that's when they're not being cautious, and that's when they are giving you the only, really the only opportunity to hunt them during the year. Now in terms of hunting strategy, the same hunting strategy applies during the rut as it would of any other time during the hunting season. You want to look for the feeding areas, you want to be quiet, you want to minimize your scent, you want to reduce your impact in their environment, and basically be in the right place at the right time. However, during the peak of the rut, it is appropriate to be out in the open looking for bucks at any given time during the day. And if you're in an area that you can access with your vehicle, it would be a good hunting strategy to just drive around and look for bucks out in the open, because they will be traveling from point A to point B. When a buck finds a doe or group of does to breed, and he gains the successful rates to breed them, he will only breed them a handful of times before he moves on and tries to find other does. He's not just going to stay with 4 does and breed them continually. He'll breed them a couple of times, and then he'll move on and find new does and breed them and move on and find new does, and so on and so forth. So that's where you'll see the bucks traveling all over the place in your hunting area during the day. And that will give you the opportunity to see more bucks, but it actually means that you should be expanding your hunting area. Because if you sit in one spot looking at one group of does hoping that a buck comes in, well, that may or may not happen. A buck or more than one buck may have come in and bred those does and moved on. Or those does just may not be bred for whatever reason. So you should be looking out in big open areas where you can get a good vantage point and see if there's any bucks traveling from point A to point B. You should be moving around and looking in a lot of different areas because those bucks are on the move, and your strategy of just staying put might not be appropriate. Now, you may have heard the terms late rut and early rut. Really, there only is the rut, in which means the period of time in which does are in estrus and they are being bred. But the early rut can refer to bucks getting ready for the rut, meaning that they're practice fighting with trees, or they're just doing sort of light fighting at this point and not really fighting. They're just sort of almost just gauging who is the dominant buck in the area, and that might be considered the early rut. Now, that is not going to be as optimal as time to hunt deer as it would be sort of the peak of the rut, but that does mean that bucks are more active than they otherwise would be. And I have to stress to you that big mature bucks are not active. They're quiet during the day and they only feed at night, and you do not see them. So any sort of activity at all for a mature buck is a good thing, because that's going to give you an opportunity that would otherwise not exist. The late rut sort of refers to when estrus is over for the does, and basically the bucks haven't figured it out yet, and they're still chasing does around, even though the does will no longer allow the bucks to breed them. The late rut would sort of mean that the peak rut activity is tapering off, but again, any increased buck activity is going to be a good thing, because that means you're going to see more bucks. But physiologically, there's no such thing as a late rut or a early rut. There's the rut where the does are being bred, a little bit of activity before, a little bit of activity afterwards, peaking right during the period of time which does are in estrus. If you're hunting for a doe, I would actually target my time before the rut. The bucks can actually chase the does around quite a bit before the does allow them to breed them. Like I said, the estrus is only 2 to 3 days, but the bucks may be chasing them around for a week. So by the time the rut actually finishes, the does could be stressed and have been chased around for a week. So I would actually prefer to hunt them before the rut, at the start of the hunting season, before they've been shot at by any hunters and before they've been chased around by bucks. They will probably be the least cautious during the year at the first week of hunting season. So if you're hunting for a doe, I would hunt before the rut. Typically, the rut occurs sometime in the middle of the hunting season. When the hunting season starts, the rut probably would not be in full swing yet, and when hunting season ends, the rut would probably have finished. But just because the rut is the most optimal time to hunt deer, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be hunting at every other time during the year. They're still a wild animal, and they're still unpredictable, and you do not know when you're going to see a deer on any given day. The more time in the field, the greater your chances are going to be harvesting a deer, no matter what the deer are doing. From my own personal experience, there's one ranch I hunt on where the landowner actually prefers to hunt during the rut. So I don't actually have access to that land during the rut. But that's not always a bad thing. At the start of the season, nobody has shot at these bucks for an entire year, and so they're actually a little less cautious. And so I'm still able to harvest a pretty good buck every year, even though it's not during the rut. I'm taking the benefit of the fact that nobody's hunted these things for a full year. So there's just a good example of why you should be hunting deer as often as you possibly can. Even though you're more likely to see them during the rut, you can still see a deer any day of the year. Hey guys, hope you liked the video. If you have any questions or anything else you want to know, put them in the comments below, and we will put another video answering all your questions. We want to be the best resource for deer hunting out there on the internet, on YouTube, and we'll continue to put out great content, so please subscribe below.